there, you know, like not gonna make me upset or angry, but also not gonna be anybody I seek out. I think I was more shocked that Cat Stevens did not fall in this category for me with that album,
Yeah.
as much as I was that James Taylor did, and I think that's my takeaway. I totally understand why people like this music. I don't hate it like I do, say, Billy Joel, who I think I would probably say what you say, Matt, about the pandering and sort of like everything is a lesser version by a factor of like 5 than something that came before it. So maybe I'll save my vitriol for like, you know, Billy Joel. But yeah.
You know what's
Naked Ladies.
You know what this is? This is music that you hear at the dentist office, and I can't really get behind anything too strongly that is designed to like soothe you and make you distract your mind or make you lose tension to the fact that your teeth are getting cleaned.
Poor James Taylor. I feel like we should have somebody on here to sing the merits of James Taylor because he is so popular, I don't want us to sound like a chorus. And like I said, while the songs don't necessarily speak to me, I understand why they speak to a lot of folks. And there is some decent guitar on here. There's certainly steel guitar on this. There's, you know, a good amount of bass on it. I think there's some fiddle at points in different songs, so there's a lot of different instrumentation. So
no, and people love them, you know, and that's great, you know. It's for whatever, like there's not many artists that I'm just like I just don't like anything, and he's kind of in there for me. Yeah, thumbs down, but I don't know everything either, so
okay.
There is that.
Any final thoughts? This could be an interesting cut on YouTube if I ever cut this one. I have to do this. I can just see the comments from James Taylor fans just pillaging Matt and me. Just
what happened was I think my audio equipment could tell how angry I was getting, and it just started smoking.
Enough.
And malfunctioned. So
it's your audio equipment is a James Taylor fan. So yeah.
Even robots like James Taylor.
So. All right. So unfortunately, Mr. Taylor, and I think this is the only album we're doing of his. This is going to be kind of a non-recommend across the board, albeit from vitriolic non-recommend by Matt to sort of more non-recommend from me, and with Josh for fans of dental music only. So,
Josh would rather hear "Shout at the Devil" in the dentist office.
There you go. So okay, so 4 albums down, 2 to go. We're going to go in a slightly completely different direction, I would say. I said slightly and then completely. It's more of a completely different direction. We're going to do Curtis Mayfield's debut solo album. He was in the Impressions, for those that want to know about stuff like that throughout the 60s. But Curtis Mayfield's solo album, Curtis, from 1970. So we started with Matt last time. This will be Josh's second time taking the reins. After Matt gives us the numbers for Curtis, we'll have you jump in, okay?
So this is 275 in Rolling Stone's list, and on Best Ever Albums, it is 173 in the 1970s and 24 in the year 1970 and 760 overall, and it is his second highest rated album behind Superfly, which I think we're going to cover in another bonus episode.
You got it. It's all right. The floor is yours, Josh.
Oh, I love this album. It is definitely up there for the 70s albums that we've talked about so far as one of my top albums. I only knew Curtis Mayfield from the Superfly soundtrack and seeing the movie. Pusher Man's one of my favorite songs ever, probably. And just hearing this album front to back, top to bottom, it is miraculous. It is everything you want in a 70s black artist or artist's music. I love the funk on it. I love the instrumentation and the production. I love his voice. I love how he incorporates Black America and social issues and social commentary in his songs, yet also the songs are super catchy and really danceable. And I'm sure everyone knows what, recognizes samples from Move On Up and some other songs as well. Curtis Mayfield is unafraid to speak and say it like it is right from the jump, and don't worry if there's a hell below, we're all going to go. I mean, that title alone is amazing, but then he's talking about crackers and white people and everybody
N-words.
that's telling everybody that we're all treating each other bad and we're not making things better for each other. And then you go down to a song. He's got an amazing love song like The Makings of You, and then We the People Who Are Darker Than Blue. I mean, this is like Nina Simone level kind of lyric writing and singing. It's just on another level. Also, a song like Miss Black America, that's so clever and catchy, and I just love this album on the listen. It was great to walk to. It's a real strutting album, and he is just able to blend like the good and the bad in terms of like the bad of America and the kind of the heartbreak and probably the Black experience then and now, versus with this like upbeat, poppy, hopeful type of sound. High recommend for me.
Josh, was that the part of the trip where Emily kicked you out of the car and you had to hitchhike? What do you mean you were walking? I thought you listened to this when you were driving.
This one I listened while walking the dog around the neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
At my parents' house.
All right. Okay. I'm glad
So yeah, that was.
It's like that's a long walk.
Yeah, but yeah. How about you, John? What did you think of Curtis?
I was not as high on this album as you. I liked it, but I thought, I don't know. I thought it's of its time, 1970.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the first track. I loved it, and if it was just the first track, I'd be all in. And then there was some stuff along the way I liked. I would still call this a recommend. I thought where you were hearing sort of profound, I was hearing a little bit like, there's a theme and I want to make everything rhyme. So sometimes you get like segregating, and words like that where it's like, like a good theme, but like it just kind of like gets jammed in a little bit, there's different times that, and other times there's wordplay along the way. I am familiar with the Superfly album. I'm familiar with the Impressions. I like Superfly better than this album. There's a lot of good bass lines in this album, and there's a lot of pieces of this album I like, but as a fully constructed album, I think he did better work a little bit later than this, and I think you can find soul funk in particular that kicks me a little bit. To me, funk has to kick you in the crotch a little bit, and like some of the stuff we did, like Parliament and earlier Sly and the Family Stone and stuff, kicked me a little bit more than this album did. It only pales, I think, though, because we're hearing like the best of that genre along the way, and like Isaac Hayes, another one that I think outstrips this.
Yeah.
So I don't want it to sound like I don't like this album, because it's still a pretty considerable thumbs up for me. I just don't know if I liked it as much as you did, Josh, along the way. And lyrically, I give him a lot of credit for speaking about the Black experience, but I think at times the wordplay got a little bit bogged down by... The lyrics got a little bogged down by the fact that the wordplay was a little too cute by half, as they say, if that makes sense. And they were like, the first song comes with police violence and using, expletives and slurs and stuff like that, that once you get past that and listen to some of the other ones, the stories are a little bit more straightforward. I'll try to pick out some examples of kind of what, the differences in the lyrics between the songs as Matt kind of gives his take.
Okay.
So I think I would say, first of all, I think this, of all the albums that we've covered so far in the 70s, this sounds the most like the 70s of anything that we've done so far. It's very, it's got a lot of that, like the orchestration, the production. It just sounds, like kind of like the wah-wah guitar parts. The horns, it all just sounds 70s, so I would say that, first of all. I did like it. It's not the type of thing that I usually listen to, this overall genre. It's like the soul funk. I don't know. It's like, it's a bunch of things together. There's all kinds of instrumentation. There's bongos all over the place here, I do like his voice. It's got certainly a high-pitched falsetto, but it's also very restrained. He's not, a lot of times you can tell that he is, it's a very controlled subdued kind of vocal part that he's doing, as opposed to like belting stuff out. Yeah, it's not really a whole lot of that. So he's kind of holding back on there and reserving on that. I think that's fine. I think it also fits with what he's doing here. But overall, I liked it. I'm kind of in the middle. It's a lukewarm like. I would probably like to listen to this more, because again, this is not the type of genre that I typically listen to. But it's got a lot of interesting stuff on here. I think "Wild and Free" might be my favorite song on it. I really like the horns. I think it might be the trumpet parts that they're doing there. Oh, you didn't like that?
That's really interesting. That's my least favorite song by quite a bit on this.
Is that because of this? Is that because of the song, or is that more of the lyric stuff that you were really?
I thought the lyrics are super. Is that the one that's like "Power to the People" with the steeple? It's like a lot of it. Wild and free. How we want to be.
Very
it's
good.
kind of. It's just
not very good.
I wasn't feeling
says it.
I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't
Power
feeling
to
it.
the
I gotta be
people.
honest.
Let's go to the steeple. Yeah. No, and that's the thing too. It's like, so you can talk about and I can't really. I wasn't really listening for that stuff, but I just like the music part of it, the horns. I thought that was very catchy and very, I like that. So, but yeah, it's I feel like this is hard for me to kind of really give a ton of commentary on with only listening to it really once. This is something that I need to listen to more.
So, and see, Josh, I like this album, so I want to like dig back a little bit, because there's a lot I like. But I think I actually like it probably more than it sounds like Matt might have. But it didn't transcend to that next level for me, like a lot of the other funk we did. And I would say that funk and soul and R&B are very much in my lane. So expand for me, like what because you obviously really connected with this album. What connected with this album compared to, say, like some of the other funk that we did, like Sly and the Family Stone, Isaac Hayes, Funkadelic? Like, what stood out for this one compared to those?
I just right from the get-go, I responded to the sound of the album and the music in it. I think it just made me, tap my feet and like move to the beat, and I was just digging what he was putting down, basically.
Well, on that first track, I get it, because that is an awesome bass line, like that dun, 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 dun. It's like a really tight beat that you don't mind hearing a lot of times. So, yeah.
And I just really like this. I don't think the fact that it sounds like the 70s is a criticism for this album. I think it's capturing a time and place, an important time and place in history. And I also very much associate this type of music with like the blaxploitation movies of the 70s, which I also have an affection for. And so it was just kind of refreshing to hear something like this, and not knowing too much about the music side of things and only knowing Superfly. I was happy to hear more of his music. I think that's what I responded to.
Gotcha. That makes sense. It's with your love of movies too. Is it fair to say that this is some of the first stuff that's kind of really familiar for you that we've done, or is that an oversimplification?
In terms of movies, or
in
music
terms of
from movies, or
because I know a lot of times in the '60s you were more often saying like this is not really a part of my consciousness and stuff, but this is obviously part of it. Is that a little bit of it, or not so much?
No, I wouldn't say that, but I don't know. I was able to dial in on this album more, even though only listening to it once.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the tough thing with Cold List and Hot Take. There are some that you'd want to hear a second time.
Right.
I even make notes sometimes to when time presents itself to re-listen to some albums. And I wouldn't necessarily say that this one would be it for me, but it certainly sounds like for Matt it might be.
Yeah, I just think that, particularly for something that I don't listen to a whole lot, I find like the Dusty Springfield album that we did, Dusty in Memphis, is a good, example of that. Because I remember the first time I heard it, I think my initial reaction was kind of negative. It was like, what is this like that? And again, it's that 70s orchestration, the production. It's kind of like, ugh, like this isn't really my thing. And the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. The more I saw past that, appreciated for what it was and the songwriting and stuff. So I think there's a lot more. I mean, comparatively, there's a lot more going on here. There's harp in here. There was actually a part where
I'd noticed that too.
I heard the synths, like the keyboards that were playing, and I'm like, man, it sounds like they're trying to mimic a harp. And then the next song, I'm like, no, that's actually a harp that they're doing there. So, and like the bongos, there's like the Santana bongos. There's the similarity there between, what Santana is doing, because there's bongos, the frantic bongo playings over a lot of this stuff. I like how they bring it down, how they kind of start off slow and they bring it up and bring it back slow again. So there's kind of they're playing with the tempo. So there's a lot of elements to this that I do like. I don't think there was anything that I walked out of hearing a song and going like, man, that's not good. Well, I think there was stuff that maybe I would say, like Miss Black America is a good example. Maybe the last song, not Magic Bus. that's
Give It Up.
Who. Give It Up. Like something like those where I think that might be something I would want to listen to a little bit more, like I do the whole album. But no, I liked it. For something that I'd never really had a whole lot of experience or knowledge about before. I do like it. Yeah.
And I do want to say a couple things. Number one, it feels like there's about 40 musicians playing on every song on this album. Mm-hmm. And that's like, that's the one thing I'd like to go back and listen to all the different pieces. Because like Matt, I was picking out random instrumentation. And sometimes it was hard because there were some bass lines and stuff that were going on that I really wanted to lock down on and just kind of ride out. And so I do think this would have more replay value from that sense. I also want to say this actually sounds in some ways, not the funk part of it, but other parts of it, kind of like those late 60s jazz albums we were doing. All the musicians, the combination of sounds, the consciousness in it. It doesn't sound as much like the Impressions that Curtis Mayfield was in, his group in the 60s. So if you're familiar with the Impressions, and you're thinking sort of that R&B sound that the Impressions had, it's pretty clear that Curtis Mayfield was drawing a line in the sand for his solo career where he was going to be doing something different. And Superfly doesn't sound much like the Impressions in the 60s as well. So I do think it's interesting what Curtis Mayfield's solo artist sounds like compared to Curtis Mayfield, in the Impressions. So I do want to point that out for those that might be familiar. Yep. Any final thoughts on Curtis by Curtis Mayfield?
Full disclosure, I've never heard of the Impressions.
Okay. It's just an R&B group from the 60s.
I'm excited to listen to more of his music. I'm glad we're going to talk about Superfly. Maybe I'll rewatch that as well. Maybe we can all.
Is that a good movie,
that.
Josh?
Yeah, it's of its time for sure, but it's awesome.
It's highly entertaining, and it depends on how much you like to pretend that stuff that was 40 years ago that people have to pay for sins of what culture was 40 years ago. You know what I mean? Like if you feel they have to.
No, I wouldn't say it's like the most representational picture of black people.
Well, and then of course the question is, who gets to call something woke if it's from somebody else's culture, which of course is another thing that we can revisit another time. But so yeah, I think 3 thumbs up, 1 enthusiastic thumbs up, and 2 relatively solid thumbs up along the way for Curtis Mayfield. So check it out, Curtis by Curtis Mayfield. And